Now, the absence of Bryson Tiller, an artist whose presence a couple years ago was very much felt, but not so much right now. There's a couple things I want to say about this topic, so yeah. Let's talk about it. Now, this year, it'll be 5 years ago since Trapsoul by Bryson Tiller dropped. Despite this album being dropped several years ago, it still sounds fresh as hell. This album is, if you ask me, a timeless one. Bryson Tiller set the bar extremely high with Trapsoul, and even though this was his introduction to the game, it was definitely a statement. For 14 records straight, Bryson didn't miss a single shot.
What a shame. If you were mine, you would not get the same.
The album was his own documentation of everything that happened in his love life up until that point. It came from an extremely realistic perspective. It wasn't this glamorous filled love story Bryson tried to portray, which I think was a big reason why it was so successful. It was simply relatable. And this album is, in a weird way, an entire era. You know, the Trapsoul era. I think that's why we're having this Bryson Tiller absence conversation in the first place. His presence in the game was so noticeable when he first came out, but that was kind of the peak of it. True to Self was, of course, the follow-up to Trapsoul, and that dropped over 3 years ago. However, since then, we haven't really heard that much from him, musically speaking, apart from a couple songs here and there. I think Bryson being absent from the music industry for such a long time has done a couple things. The first thing is, it's obviously killed the momentum. That's the obvious part of it all. Bryson was well on his way to becoming something really special in the game. It really makes me hurt seeing what he could have became fade away during his absence. You don't really see too many people putting him in the conversation nowadays. And I've talked about this before, but fans are extremely fickle, especially in these times. There's always so much music dropping, so many artists coming and going. Bryson is never truly gonna go because his debut was so powerful and memorable. That's why I think he has his name cemented in the game, even if he stops making music, period. But we know that his second album, True to Self, wasn't really received all that well. Not talking numbers wise, by the way, because if we look at the numbers, it did more than 100,000 copies first week, which is amazing. I'm more so talking about the general reception from the community, excluding the numbers, but it was definitely not close to that Trapsoul level. A lot of people would call it disappointing, and this is actually something Bryson Tiller himself spoke on in 2018. He had this interaction with one of his fans on Twitter who was frustrated at the fact that there wasn't any new music from him dropping. Bryson responded and said that he's not trying to disappoint like he did before, referring to True to Self. I think the reception of the album was only bad in comparison to Trapsoul. One thing I never see people mentioning is the fact that he had the luxury of working on Trapsoul for pretty much his entire life. He had the luxury of preparing for Trapsoul his entire life, but didn't have that same luxury when he dropped his second album. I think when you have to follow up another album right after your first one that took you to crazy heights off the rip, there's gonna be a whole lot of contrast there. The album was clearly not bad, at least if you ask me. It just wasn't Trapsoul. And let's just keep it real, considering the success of Trapsoul, a whole lot of people, probably the majority, were expecting Trapsoul 2.0. And then when it ended up not being Trapsoul 2.0, a lot of people got disappointed. Now, as far as True to Self, Bryson actually spoke about the depression he was facing before he made that album. Now, he's saying that that affected the music in itself, which obviously I'm not gonna doubt. Now, one thing I've seen him talk about in the past is the fact that he's an introvert, which makes sense. For a while, when he was blowing up, he was seen as this very mysterious personality in the music industry. A lot of artists try to use the mystery approach as a gimmick, but when it comes to Bryson, that was him being true to himself. No pun intended. As far as his next release, which is Serenity, if he hasn't changed the title, there's not really too much information about when it's gonna come out. It's been delayed a couple times already. At this point, I think everyone who's patiently waiting for an album from Bryson Tiller is his core fanbase, the people who listen to him and support the album no matter what. And then whenever it does come out, depending on how it's sounding, that's when the rest of the world will catch up. Bryson Tiller, to me at least, has been a great artist. I think Trapsoul is proof of what he's capable of. I'm not really too confident in whether or not he can once again capture that whole Trapsoul vibe on whatever he drops next, but then again, is that something I should even be thinking about? I think it's safe to say that he's most likely in a completely different headspace right now than he was back then. At the end of the day, I really just think it's about him coming back with a dope body of work that's gonna make up for all the time he hasn't been in the spotlight. The good thing about him not dropping an album so soon after his last one is that he's actually taking his time, unlike a lot of other artists. He's clearly not trying to rush the process, which I really appreciate appreciate my outlook on things when it comes to the music is a little bit different, because I'd rather have one exceptional album every couple years instead of one okay/good one every single year. That's not the majority of people though, and I get that. Whenever that album ends up dropping though, I'm gonna be all ears. I'm curious what the music is actually gonna sound like. Hopefully soon it'll go from the absence to the comeback. But yeah, Bryson Tiller, he's been absent from the music industry for a while now. Do you think despite all the time he's been gone, a comeback is still possible? By the way, are you still bumping his music? Definitely let me know in the comment section below and let's have a discussion about this.